Over the past few days, there's been a big shift in the market that I honestly don't hear many people talking about, and it's one of the main reasons why you're getting a big Bitcoin move at the moment. And not just Bitcoin, a lot of altcoins are also starting to wake up, with Bitcoin on the verge of a major breakout here at the 80K level. So in today's video, I'm going to discuss exactly what is driving this current price action, what I think is going to happen next for the market, and how I am positioning myself to capitalize. So firstly, let's just start by discussing the Bitcoin price action. Obviously, we have been in a downtrend on the weekly for quite some time, and this started to deviate substantially from most of the major moving averages. You can now see that price has come back up to the weekly money noodle and the weekly 200-day moving average for a retest for the first time since January at the start of this year. So it's the first major retest we are seeing of this indicator. And then coming back down to the daily time frame here, you can see this is the first time that we are now testing this gap that formed back in February between 79,000 and 81,000. And this is a pretty substantial move because we have rejected a couple of times in the past, but now we are starting to push through it with haste. And there is a reason why this is happening. Actually, there are two reasons. I'll get into this very soon. And those reasons actually hold the key for why I do believe we could actually see price action pushing even further to the upside, because this is now starting to look like a Bitcoin move that has some momentum to push even higher to the next gap, which is at 92K. But I'll talk about how I would actually maneuver that trade and my thinking around that trade in a minute. I mean, if you just go down onto the low time frames and turn on the money noodle, you can see here we have been in a Bitcoin uptrend since the 30th of March. So if you've been watching the channel or in my Discord where I'm pretty active, you'll know that I've been saying, look, price action actually looks good, and my bias has been to the upside for the past couple of weeks because we've been grinding higher, making higher lows and higher highs. What I was saying is that there's a major level, and that's the 80K level that we need to get above. And this is a level that we've been rejecting multiple times. I mean, we saw it back in February, we saw it in April, we saw it again a week ago, and now we are starting to see price action now aggressively pushing into this level. Now, the two reasons why we are getting this move is, firstly, there's a massive short squeeze going on right now. There's actually $500 million in liquidations over the past 24 hours. The majority are actually on the short side. So we're seeing quite a big short squeeze, and I think this is indicative of the overall positioning in the market. The market is pretty offside. I mean, anyone that wanted a chance to capitulate their Bitcoin has basically been afforded that opportunity, and many people have capitulated their Bitcoin. And anyone that has wanted to build a short position, or anyone that has wanted to fade the trend, has had ample opportunity to do so. So you see a lot of offside positioning. A, people offloading their Bitcoin at the bottom. That's how bottoms tend to form. And then B, people actually shorting every single time Bitcoin makes a move to the upside. And because there aren't that many sellers left, and because there is significant buying pressure, I'll get into who's actually buying Bitcoin right now and is providing that pressure, you're seeing an environment where price can just squeeze to the upside because simply there just isn't that many sellers and there is substantial buying pressure coming into the market. So where is the buying pressure coming from? Well, the first major shift that we have seen is actually in the ETF flows, 629 million 3 days ago, and that is likely going to start the week in the green as well. This is some of the biggest ETF flows we have seen in a few weeks, and ETFs have been relatively muted in recent times. So there are actually institutions that keep buying Bitcoin. In the face of adversity, their mandate is to accumulate, and this is a good sign. It shows you that there are still willing buyers, even at the 80K level, to actually step in and buy. But of course, the big buyer, and the reason why some of this move is happening right now and it's actually being front run, is of course Michael Saylor. So if you actually look at some of the projections here, Taiki did some great math. Saylor is expected to buy between $2 to $3 billion of Bitcoin over the next 2 weeks. And you can see that their ex-dividend date is in the middle of every month. So Saylor typically starts buying billions of Bitcoin around the beginning of every month. So it's likely that he is either A, pushing up the market now, or B, expected to be pushing up the market, hence why this move is starting to be front run. And you don't, as I said before, you don't have a lot of sellers in the market. So when you have a big buyer like Saylor, it can push price up and liquidate people really quickly. On the flip side, the reason why I'm still a little bit cautious is exactly what I just said. So although this is optimistic, and although you definitely now have to consider that this trend will continue, the trend is your friend is to the end of the trend, and on the lower timeframes especially, the trend is still to the upside, we have to be wary of the fact that the market is starting to front run this, and at a certain point, do sellers start to step in and essentially use Saylor as exit liquidity, as we've seen the last couple of times. So that is the real question, alongside the fact that although we are into a major level now, we haven't technically closed above, and there hasn't been confirmation, for example, on the weekly time frame. If you go into the weekly, this is simply move up to a major resistance zone. So you would at least want to see a weekly close before saying, all right, Bitcoin has, confirmed its breakout now. What I will say is that for me, probabilistically, Bitcoin moves to the upside, just given the fact that we are seeing nice velocity. We aren't seeing a lot of willing sellers at these levels, which is encouraging for me. So with Bitcoin, it's really, and I'll speak about alt in a minute, it's really a day-by-day thing where you just have to look at the reaction of the market to move. And what I'm seeing right now is the market isn't shutting down these moves, which is a sign that, in my opinion, things aren't exhausted. The fact that we continue to make higher highs, Bitcoin probably does go higher. How much higher does it go? I mean, obviously you've got this major level at 90K. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge until then. We may even reject and come down for a bit before we have another leg to the upside. That's what I think could happen in the short term. And obviously during that period, which we'll discuss, this can be great for altcoin trading opportunities because Bitcoin is the barometer for the market overall. And I've been much more active over the last couple of weeks in terms of altcoins because that sentiment, although a lot of people are offside and a lot of people aren't interested in crypto anymore, it is making its way onto the altcoin charts if you know where to look. And I think that's exciting. And obviously the other elephant in the room is that equities are performing so well right now. It's only natural for Bitcoin to have a little bit of a catch up after, we continue to see NASDAQ make new highs. On the weekly chart and on the monthly picture, I still do think Bitcoin is in a downtrend, and my bias is still that we probably go down and make, either new lows or at some point we flirt with that 60 to 70K region again. I don't think this is the giga bottom and we're just suddenly going to go and make new highs. I do think there is a lot of water to go under the bridge, and likely you do see this as a relief rally, but then you see price starting to come down and consolidate, because I still think, although Bitcoin is a very reflexive asset to risk, I think the correlation versus equities has been negative, and clearly a lot of the selling pressure that happened has set Bitcoin back a bit, because a lot of people, especially the more traditional investors, are like, look, I can just get better risk reward returns in the stock market right now, where I can put money in, I can get instant returns in AI. Bitcoin from a risk reward perspective isn't as attractive, which is why I think it might take, a number of quarters or potentially over a year to fully reset. So I'm still playing the long game with Bitcoin, certainly not getting too excited over a move like this, but I think we do need to acknowledge the strength right now and just play the chart as it comes. And clearly this opens up opportunity, which I want to discuss now. But before we discuss those opportunities, I want to pick some winners from the last video. I'll pick 5 winners, give away $100 to people that commented Noti Gang and obviously have notifications turned on. We check before we send out the money. So let me pick a few people. 1, Spike, you win. Kims, you win. Owl down, you win. We'll go down a little bit. Fahim, I'm probably pronouncing this wrong. You win. And I'll pick one more. Kaiva, you win. That's 5 people. You win $100. Email the giveaways email below. And if you do want a chance of winning, if you didn't have the opportunity to win today, just comment Noti Gang. Make sure you have notifications turned on. And you stand a chance in the next video to win. This is something that we do on the channel. So let's talk about altcoins now. Look, if Bitcoin does well, and even if Bitcoin, just continues to hold up, I do think this paves the way for a broader risk appetite in the market. Now, clearly this isn't going to be a big alt season where everything goes up. I think that theory for now is dead and buried, and that's okay. As investors, we need to look for the pockets of outperformance. We need to look for the narratives with a lot of attention. What I will say is that narratives that do have attention, they can still run really quick, and we've actually seen over the past couple of weeks, the trenches have been relatively active. If you haven't been paying attention to crypto, maybe you should, because there's actually some moves that are starting to happen behind the scenes. And I know people that are really tapped in are actually doing quite well right now. A couple of trades that we had recently that I spoke about in the Mars High Club did really well. I spoke about Asteroid on the 29th of April. You can see since I spoke about it, what's this, the 29th, it's now at 52%. I also spoke about it a couple of days ago. It's up since then as well. This is basically the meme coin linked to the SpaceX IPO. So this is obviously a very hyped event. In the last video, which I still recommend watching, if you didn't, you can watch after this, I talked about the 3 events that I am using to print hopefully a lot of capital this year. One being the World Cup, one being GTA 6, and then the other one being the SpaceX IPO, where there are a couple of memes around that event, but Asteroid is the main one that I'm holding. So this is nice, 52% up for all the members in Miles High Club. If you're not in Miles High Club, come and join, because we're entering a more active era of the market now. And, if you want these calls, that's the first place that I post them, especially now that I'm not as active on YouTube. I said to myself on the YouTube side, I'm only dropping bangers. now. I'm not doing the daily updates anymore. I did it for a while, but I realized that I'd just prefer to give you updates when I feel like I have a lot to say. And clearly today, there's a big shift that's occurring. And, I wanted to do an update. And then the last video, I gave you my full strategy for those 3 events. So I feel like that was a really high alpha per minute video. I'm trying to be the highest alpha per minute channel in the crypto space. That's my goal at the moment. Another one that I spoke about was card starter. I still think there is legs here, especially given the low float. I think it's around 10%. Clearly that's going to be dangerous at some point, but it can also create an opportunity. I posted in my Discord that I was buying some cards, as you can see, at 6.8. I think recently that hit 15, so it was over a 2x since the call just a couple of weeks ago. So cards was another great one. I posted about it a couple other times as well. So yeah, we've had a couple nice hits in the Discord, and this just comes from being tapped into the market, paying attention. I think Bio was another one that I had mentioned. I didn't officially call it, but I told people to take a look at it. You can see here is actually number 3 on my watch list on April 17th. And if you look at what Bio is doing right now, I think it's doing some crazy stuff. This is obviously like the decentralized science coin that's running a lot. I mean, since I posted my watch list, it's up, what's it up like? About 100%. It was 116% at the peak. So yeah, even though that wasn't a call, I just like to keep you guys updated there as to the stuff that I'm looking at. So I still feel like, okay, yes, you kind of hold a portfolio of, dozens of alts. I actually did a post in the Discord yesterday where I said, look, I feel like right now, and just generally in markets, having less concentrated bets is better than having more smaller bets, aka diversification kind of kills you in crypto. Not only in terms of returns, but in terms of time and focus. Like, it's much easier to manage, invalidate, take profit on, check team updates for 3 positions as opposed to 10 positions, 15 positions. And it means when you're right, when you do hit a trade, you're really right and you get the majority of the upside. And when you're wrong, you're actually less wrong because you're more focused and locked in and aren't as distracted because you're holding less positions to actually de-risk if the signs are there that momentum is starting to go against you. So my approach in the market right now is, let me just hold a much more concentrated portfolio of things that I hold long-term. For example, Bitcoin, Hyperliquid, Tau, like coins that I think are going to be around. I have a more concentrated watch list that I manage, and then I have a more concentrated basket of positions. Obviously cards and Asteroid are some of the recent positions that I added, but I'll continue to make these more concentrated trades when I see an opportunity. So that's the approach in the market right now. It's not holding a big altcoin portfolio. It's holding a portfolio you're happy with. Bitcoin, maybe a couple of alts that you believe in long term and you think have an advantage in the market and have product market fit and are generating revenue, except that a lot of the other stuff is vaporware. But then have a percentage of your portfolio which you're willing to trade with, and that's where you're going to be spending the majority of your time. On the lookout for these plays. Obviously, I keep you guys up to date on this channel and live in MHC, but if you know where to look, there are definitely opportunities in the market. And I think if Bitcoin could continue this move, even if it does get rejected here, it may, but if it can continue to grind to the upside, and in the best case scenario, if it can genuinely flip 80K, we get a weekly close and we have a push towards 90K. I mean, because altcoins are so beat down, because they've been so suppressed, because there are so many shorters, you could see some really violent reprices to the upside. So now is actually a time, you guys know, I've been spending more time in recent months on building AI workflows and research and not as much hunting altcoins. What I'll tell you, and this should be indicative of how things are shifting at the moment, I'm actually shifting a lot of time back into the crypto market because I do think if things reprice, they can happen quite violently, and I want to be there to be able to catch some of these moves. Not holding them forever, not marrying bags, but catching momentum moves, which can enable me to stock up potentially before, Bitcoin will come back down again towards the end of the year. I mean, it depends on when you think the stock market's going to put in a top. That is a video for another time. It's actually quite fascinating. I've got my theory on it. The TLDR is I think that'll probably happen towards the first half of 2027. Bitcoin tends to front run these moves. So any relief rally, any bear market relief, which I would still consider this to be, as opposed to a bull market pivot, is a great opportunity to make money, especially when things are this beaten down. So that's what I have for you today. Hopefully this video helps in terms of portfolio management and just overall thoughts on the market. 80K level is still big. Gonna see if we can flip this level. Definitely watching it mostly on the H4 right now to see what happens. Looking for a weekly close. Obviously it's a long week, so if there is an update between now and then, that is major. I will be here to provide it for you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully you have a lovely rest of your day. Peace out.